Yeah. There's nothing wrong with Hobgoblin at the moment. I'm interested in seeing coming up with opinions that are less damning with faint praise than that statement.
Well, you are currently watching Rule of Carnage, a video or podcast series about designing better miniature games. This episode is part B of a rambling conversation that we sometimes do, these sorts of rambling conversations where, well, I suppose I should rewind. Glenn Ford is greatly established designer of board and card games, veteran of Kickstarter, and a longtime collaborator of mine. And me, a specifically tabletop miniature game obsessed designer. Quite often, when we're on our way to conventions, I should say, would have conversations about games that we liked or games that we were working on, where we would dissect them. And during lockdown, we weren't going anywhere, so we were just having those conversations on Skype occasionally. And then we started pressing record, and here we are, nearly 100 videos later. And this isn't one of the structured conversations where we talk about something specific in the realm of game design. This is in flagrante games design or games development, where Glenn gave me a stern kick in the shin earlier today and was like, wait a minute, I think there's a bit of Hobgoblin that maybe you haven't spent enough time arguing with me about. Shall we argue about it? So that's what we're doing today, people.
Yeah, and so sort of at the tail end of the last video, I was saying that there is a certain amount of this is about feeling your way around a sort of co-designer relationship, and there is a degree to where I know what I would find exciting about a system like Hobgoblin. I know why, if I saw Hobgoblin, I would pick it up and go, yeah, okay, this does something that I want it to do. I'm going to have this, and it's going to sort of fill a slot sort of in the library. And there's a degree to which, I own a horrible number of tabletop miniatures games, and I'm never going to get to play the vast number of systems that I own, and so I want something potentially niche and unnecessary in wanting to be able to pick up a game.
But also you, as pretty much all of us do who play war games, you also play a lot of board games, and board games are very self-contained. They just add water, you pop the box lid off, and there it is. I don't know if you did, but co-collaborator on Gaslands, John, and I played a lot of Battle Masters when we were kids, which was somewhat similar. You just take the top off and there you are, Battle of 5 Armies, just slap it straight down. So I think where I've heard you go in the last sort of part of this conversation is, given that there's a super fast army battling system, could there be a super fast army mustering system where you essentially blow the dust off your army case, you pop the lid, you've only just rushed over from work, we've only just cracked a can of beer, neither of us have written any army lists, but it doesn't matter because Hobgoblin is going to say, worry not, my friends, have a good time smashing your armies together.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's both a big departure from where I sort of have been pushing the army construction system, and also quite a natural direction for a game that is very obsessed with a short, sharp, brutal fantasy battle experience. And I think where the last part of the conversation led me was that I'm a little bit unsure on this particular area of the game design. I'm not certain how to defend the game at this point, which makes me want to design a few things and kick them around.
Yeah, because this sort of tracks back to, back at the start of the previous conversation, a full, 45 minutes ago for us and over a week ago for anybody watching the two of them. I said one of the things that can hold you back from getting as many games in with your models as you might like is that you've got to go through a pre-arranging packing up of an army and traveling to a location process. And what I like, one of the things about the idea of what Hobgoblin could do that I think is quite sexy is that I could be at your house as we wait for other people to turn up to a gaming thing, and somebody texts to say that they're going to be 45 minutes late, and we can go, well, let's have a quick, game. And I'll go, oh, I can't, I haven't bought an army. And you can be like, oh, it's fine, you can use one of my armies, but I don't understand your lists, I don't know what you've got. It's like, it's fine, we'll play Hobgoblin. We'll play Hobgoblin, and it'll be absolutely fine that you don't have a list, and it's fine that you haven't played my army, because we'll put it down, and then the list will be popped out as we start playing. And it's like, oh, lovely, brilliant. We'll get in a quick 45-minute game while somebody's late.
And one thing that I think is really worth just sort of dropping into this discussion is sort of the obvious, why not both? Like,
oh yeah,
it's perfectly reasonable. In fact, there are going to be other elements of the game as it will be released where providing optionality. Like, I mean, a campaign system tends to be an option anyway. Like, you can play a campaign game, or you could just play a single game. And I have two versions of like objectives and victory points written. And to be honest with you, I like them both. And one of them's simpler and one of them's more complicated. And some of the playtesters said, do you know what? We really liked this more complicated one. That was the thing that was going to let us play for longer. And so, well, the game can have the easy one by default, and you can have a section at the back, which is like, here's the slightly more complicated one. So I think there's also and it has solo rules in it, which you wouldn't obviously use all the time. And so I think there's an element to which it's like, well, again, still might not be the best of all possible sort of generic army building systems that could exist, but it could have if you wanted to design a list because you wanted to get going and you wanted to think about your army for a long time, and then here's the just add water, hilarious realm of chaos, sort of random roll up your army type situation. And in some cases, some people might find that extremely frustrating because it isn't allowing them to min-max. Some people might find that extremely satisfying because they're bored of min-maxing and they just want to be told, here's how to have fun. And other people might find it unsatisfying because they had a specific story in their mind and the cards or the tables didn't tell the story they were wanting to tell, and that was irritating to them. So I think definitely considering it as an option, it's a get out, but I think that can temper the sort of, because that can actually make the system, that can give the system, the idea here, more permission to be extreme.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because as we're recording this, on the day we're recording this, there's been a nice conversation on one of our videos by somebody who's putting together a more generic rule. Several times I've said I think that there should be an equivalent to GURPS or the Fate system or the D20 system or whatever for tabletop miniatures games, because so many of them end up reinventing the same sort of set of rules. And I say I've just been following a conversation and sort of popping in my opinion in the comments of one of our videos from somebody who's working through this and has come across some of the issues with shooting. We need to do a video about why all shooting sucks, because it does, but that's another subject. And part of me does wonder is like, is there a world in which part of Hobgoblin is this spine of a sort of, okay, here's a mass battle system, a really fast, quick, satisfying, sweeping mass battle system, and then here's a selection of like bolt-ons for how you want to get into and then out of that mass battle system. The mass battle system is going to be one thing because there's a lot of things to learn, and also when you're at the tabletop, you want everything to be locked in everybody's brains. You don't want to have to go back to the rule book. But outside of the tabletop, we can have options to mess around the rule book, flick back and forth, try out different systems, do something that isn't locked in your head because it's inherently a more sedate solo experience, those bits of the hobby loop. And I think that's an interesting thing to sort of be able to do with Hobgoblin. So long as, you know, the core is strong and there isn't an attempt to do too many things and lose focus, which I think isn't. I think as long as that's something that's in mind, it's something that's keepable an eye on, you know. Yeah, so yeah, like I say, I personally, you know, like I say, if the depth of it has been taken out of the army building process for a laudable reason, I understand the reason why you've done it. I think it has things that I understand, you know, that are worthwhile and will achieve certain goals for certain players. I'm curious to see whether all of the depth can be sucked out of it until it's just a completely smooth process. It's barely a speed bump in you getting to the tabletop, and whether that's another interesting and fun thing, because a level of army building is so assumed now and in so many games and sort of so much a part of the process. I'm interested partly in whether removing that is going to also result in a sort of a reduction in gatekeeping as well. Because one of the things that
I mean, I understand where you're going. I just think that there's a super high risk that it just pushes the game into something that people just bounce off because it's neither one nor the other, and so people just go, well, I don't really know why I would want to play this. Like it doesn't allow me to make the armies that I want to make. Like I don't like I think that there's a really high chance that it just looks like an ugly duckling and it doesn't look like it's supposed to and doesn't provide the same roots in that it's supposed to.
I mean, I suppose one of the things that I think of is like how you get introduced to a game. And a lot of people, and a lot of the time in this hobby, the way you get introduced to a particular game is you pick up a rather complicated and, you know, multi-paged rule book, and you read through it as a process and you go, yes, I think I'll have a look at that. And I'm interested in the idea of one of these games that can be genuinely fully learnt from sort of almost from end to end, like at a tabletop, you know, as a first introduction of, this is literally the army building. Here you go. You pull these cards, you drop them on a handful of units that you want to drop them onto. That's the army building bit. There's no homework. There's no maths. There's no.
Yeah, and I think hearing you talk about it for the 7th or 8th time there, I guess, like, no, but this is useful. Like I am definitely having a reaction, which is like, no, that's not what Hobgoblin is, because I think what it's looking to create is a slightly more, I mean, to a degree, there's an element of like old school Renaissance, like speaking to the sort of Dungeons and Dragons community, like to a degree, like it, not to a degree, to a large degree, like this is rooted in my love of like 1992 and 1993 and 4 White Dwarf battle reports. And what I want is a lot of that sort of all of that sort of sense and nostalgia, but without some of the filigree or the sort of play times that actually, you know, if you were playing the game at that point in history, it wouldn't have been the same thing that I was imagining as an 11-year-old whilst reading those battle reports. And so I'm trying to create a fantasy imagined revisionist history of 1991 White Dwarf battle reports in some kind of Halican day that never existed, in a beautiful time when the game only took 60 minutes and you could have whatever units you want, and every unit only had 8 models in it. That I think is a similar project to a degree of like the sort of old school Renaissance Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like, there's too much here, there's too much. I don't want all this stuff. I just want dungeons and occasionally dragons. And I want spell lists and you know, sometimes the rogue has a special magic item, but like the warriors certainly don't have a list of incredible feats and things. They have a sword and they hit things with it. And to a degree, there's a similar project going on here with Hobgoblin, which is how can I cut as quickly to the sort of old school, you know, call it grognardian, if you will, like how can I cut to that old school sort of fantasy battle experience of pushing things around on trays, with the sort of baseline expectations filled in, which include things like the armies are in squares and they push towards each other, and I'm probably supposed to be kicking the crud out of each other, and I'm not trying to like run around capturing objectives. And I am building an army list and excited about, you know, where the powerful things and the not powerful things are, and having spellcasters and the you know the buffs and debuffs and special tricks that wizards can provide, like is a really huge part of my strategy. So in some regards, like the spells that you choose, the spell lists that you choose, are to a degree the kind of army construction that you're asking for. You could basically give people 2 mirror armies, and then the spellcaster's choice, they might have 2 or 3 wizards, and the card of 3 spells that they pull for each of those wizards in combination would be a huge decider in how that army actually unfolded on the table, because the wizards are supposed to be like, you know, the very meta game changing in the powers that they provide. Because for me, like that's what I'm trying to do with Hobgoblin. I'm trying to make those sorcerers into these, like they're the one part of the game that isn't genericized into these blocks of units. Like even your general on his griffin or on his heroic steed, like he's just another meaningless blob in this sort of square. He's just an upgrade, whereas the wizard is actually something that has sort of levels and layers to it. And then on top of that is layered something which actually this conversation is really making me think about, which is there's a generic set of fortune cards, which are basically like chance cards where you get some, they're in your hand. If a unit dies, you get some others. And those are in no way related to the army that you're playing. So there's no relationship, there's no army building relationship between what's going on in your force and what's happening in those chance cards. They're essentially just a sort of generic shared deck. And so I guess that's helped me. Like, I still think that the random army selection, or the incredibly fast army selection, is a hugely valuable, like, optional gift to give people. Like, you know, I spend quite a lot of time writing random generators because it's the one thing that I'm able to do. Like, I can imagine a Hobgoblin / gimme an army that's just like, bam, gimme an army, or like, here's the units I have, gimme an army. And so providing people that tool, I think, is cool and is good, and probably I will actually do that. But is it core to the beating heart of the Hobgoblin design? I think for all the reasons that I've just sort of exploded, like I don't think so. It doesn't feel right. Like that's not what I'm trying to achieve.
But I understand that, and I accept that, and I fully accept that the sort of the first version of an idea that I've had for dealing with what I think is a problem isn't the way of dealing with the problem. But I do still think that the army building process that there is to a degree counter, or can be manipulated in a way that is counter to some of those desires that you're talking about. Because as you're saying that, well, the thing that's going through my head is, well, why is the system pick a unit, add in 3 upgrades and 1 debuff, and build your unit? Why is it not, okay, pick from this list of races, you pick goblins, everyone gets a blah and a blah blah, that's, you've now got a goblin army. You picked undead, everyone gets a blah and a blah blah, you've now got an undead army.
Yeah, and actually this is partly because there's stuff on the workbench that hasn't been reviewed yet, but I'm not sure. So I've talked a little bit about the setting on this channel before. One of the core conceits of the setting is that I won't go into the detail of it, but there are some characters in this world, in this underground world, who have acquired great and terrible items of power. And these cursed artifacts give people multiple powers, but or rather, they manifest in many ways. But the core thing that they all do is they essentially give the bearer of this artifact the ability to manifest armies, whether that's mud golems growing into terracotta armies, or if it's like spirits emerge from the shadows, or it's that lava leaps up, or it's that actually they will into existence sort of real people who've like simulacra who have come from nowhere and then are very confused by where they are and why they have no history. And there's lots of reasons why, there's lots of mechanisms by which these bearers of cursed artifacts might manifest armies, and that's part of the sort of fantasy of, well, we can crash enormous armies in and they can be absolutely annihilated, and the engine of war will continue, and that's why this is a setting that's filled with constant conflict, even though that's often faintly ridiculous in these kinds of settings. And so it's quite a gamified sort of setting in a way. And so one of the things that I think you had a look at an early version of, but one of the things that I'm playing around with is this idea that you take an artifact, so the sort of the chalice of the blooded throne or something, and that would say, well, look, you get a discount on some of these, you get on this advantage, and you get a discount or an extra payback on this disadvantage, and so you are inspired. You are shoved in the direction of building an army that has that on as many things as possible, or uses it in an interesting way. And I think that that potentially is my that's my second attempt of having essentially a faction guidance system, where it's like, well, we don't have an actual unique goblin list, but we have the twig of the many-headed spider. And so when you have the twig of the many-headed spider, it's, you get a lot of upgrades that are about being numerous and rubbish or whatever.
Yeah, it's like
so sorry, just bouncing off. So another idea that occurred to me whilst you were talking is that there could be a sort of procedural or tree-like element to army construction, which is, I can almost imagine a sort of, it's a bit like the thing that you've described with the cards at the beginning of the game, but one could be like, well, I've got three paths in front of me. Am I the sort of army that preserves its nation, or one that's gone off to invade other people and conquer them, or one that's just hell-bent on destruction? Okay, I want to be a sort of watch the world burn army. Okay, well, so from there I can have some other things here, and I can unlock this, that, and the other, and sort of, you could imagine multiple ways of achieving that. That could be a campaign unlock system, but it could also just be like, a quick game of cards or something, and you collect up your cards at the end. You're like, oh, okay, well, I've got a bunch of clubs. That means I can have all these weaknesses or something.
Yeah, it's like I say, I feel like the army list building system there is in Hobgoblin at the moment, I feel it sort of flutters its eyes at me, like, oh, there might be something in here. There might be some intricacies in here, and some min-maxing and some advantages to gain. And even looking in to see if there are just feels wrong in a way, because it feels like even trying to find out if I can build a powerful army list sickens. it just feels like, I shouldn't be even looking to, because as soon as I see
that's a super interesting way of expressing it. So if I might have a go at playing that back. So is Hobgoblin a game which dissuades min-maxing by essentially removing the tools of min-maxing?
I mean, the thing is,
because it sort of is heading in that, it always has headed in that direction.
No, absolutely. But the issue is that as long as, if you give me a set of things I can put together to build a unit, there's an implied idea that there is advantage to be gained by doing that. That there is, if there are choices, so therefore there are right or wrong choices, and so therefore there is advantage to be gained, and therefore I should dig in and find out what if either you put in intentionally to let me do something cool and advantageous, or what you didn't spot that I can do to gain some advantage. And the very idea of, like, as soon as I look at that list that you've got for Hobgoblin, I'm instantly going, I'm pretty sure I could poke that with that and stick that in with that, and that fit. And as soon as my brain starts doing that, I just feel like, oh, this isn't what I should be doing with this. This isn't what should be happening with this system. You know, this is wrong. I should. It's something else should be occurring. And I feel like what I want to be occurring is to go, I've got some goblins. I want to play with some goblins. What are the goblins? These are the goblins. Great. Now I'm playing with some goblins. And that attracts me. That idea, I think, is cool. And I know that you sort of, in offering the a la carte menu, you've gone, there are an infinity of races that you can build here. If you are true and honest in your heart and you only want to put a particular race onto the table, there you go. I've given you the toolkit. Now you can do it. But I'm not pure and honest and decent in my heart. You know, I'm some sort of bastard, and I can't see the toolkit without going, how can I crush and appall other people using this? Oh, I think I've spotted a way. And what I want is for the game to go, it's okay, we won't you don't have to sort of listen to the devil on your shoulder. Instead, this is just goblins. These are what goblins are. You know that goblins shouldn't have elite troops. You knew that deep down. And when you put together the elite horde goblin, you knew in your heart that you were a bad person and you shouldn't have done it. It's okay. Here's a thing that saves you from yourself. And you know, and you can just do it, and it's quick, and you can, and you go, oh, okay, lovely. I can play a game without having to go through the thing of answering the call of the army building gremlins, you know. Because it's, you know, when there are systems that give you an army building system and it's not a satisfying army building system, you know, that is something that's like a sort of a burning itch of, you know, this isn't working and I shouldn't be doing it and I don't like it. And before I've got to the tabletop, I now hate this system because my first experience of the system is always going to be the army building system, if there is one. And if it's not a satisfying system, and it's one that breaks in the wrong way or in the wrong places, I already don't like that system before I've ever played a single game. And often I won't even buy model one for that game, because before I buy a model, I build the army list because I want to know what models I'm buying. And if I built the army list and I'm already pissed off when I built the army list, I'm not buying the models to play that game anyway. And so what I want from Hobgoblin, from what I would want Hobgoblin to be, is for Hobgoblin to just go, bang, that's what you're getting. You want to not care. I want to not care. Could you please just let me not care? Can you just save me from caring? What I want is to get models on, smash them together, and laugh and be free of the demons of min-maxing list building. Why are you tempting me with this succubus of, oh, you could add this upgrade and that upgrade and maybe they're naughty? I don't want you to do that. Put the lingerie away. Leave me in peace. That's the thing in my heart that I guess I'm trying to get across here.
No, I think that's very well stated. And I suppose one of the considerations is what proportion of the player base does that represent, and therefore how big a problem is it? And we don't have any data, so we don't know. But I think that is, I think, a crisp way of drawing a line between those people who are happy with an army building system which will get them to the table, and those who are looking for looking from the army building system a set of pleasures and decisions that are right and true in and of themselves, that are intrinsic to that system. So it's like, is it a piece of utility, or is it a core part of the game? And obviously, on the episode that we talked about list building, you made a very strong case that it ought to be an extremely strong part of the game. And perhaps through my actions in designing Hobgoblin, I'm exploring, rightly or wrongly, like, well, what if army building didn't really matter? But then I guess you're continuing to lean on that and just be like, well, what if it truly didn't matter? What if it truly didn't matter? But I think that there is the real risk that getting to a place where it truly doesn't matter also eliminates something. There's a baby in that bathwater.
Yeah, well, I guess it's less a question of can we get to a place where it truly doesn't matter? More, can we just get to a place where it doesn't happen? It's like, can you do Dominion? What Dominion did for Magic the Gathering. Where it sort of, where you gamify a thing that was the whole game of the other thing. See what I mean? That Warhammer is a list building game. The tabletop game is really like 10% of Warhammer. Most of that game is a list building process. And it's like, if you're not going to be the list building game, if you're not going to be Magic the Gathering, could you maybe try being instead Dominion? Could you maybe try instead being the thing that isn't about the list building, that is about something else? I don't know.
No, I don't know. And my worry is that that was explored considerably in A Billion Suns, and it might be that gives me the edge to understand how to do it a second time in a different way that perhaps approaches it in a slightly different way. But I am thoughtful about, like, Hobgoblin's not supposed to be A Billion Suns.
No.
Although I can, like, even with the background I've created of the people who can summon armies, like, it's perfectly reasonable to imagine A Billion Suns version of Hobgoblin. But that's absolutely not what it's trying to achieve, to demand that you have a sideboard filled with hundreds of units of different colors of goblin.
No, absolutely. And I think the thing of it is that the summoning of units in A Billion Suns is kind of what that game is all about. Which ones you bring in, how you cost them, etc. And doing something that says, okay, well, look, you've got the units you've got, you've pre-picked those. Now we're going to see what special sauce has been sprinkled across them. Oh, this special sauce, it's not I think the sort of necessarily the A Billion Suns equivalent. I think
it's conceivable that actually what you're potentially arguing for is simply fewer list building options.
I mean, like I say, I would be more than happy to see a thing where you pick, like I say, you literally pick one thing and it just gets blanketed across your army, and it comes with a sort of bespoke set of options, and it just says you get this, and that. There you go. You've now got
because you can imagine, one could imagine a list building system where, all right, you take as your cursed artifact the Chalice of the Blooded Throne, and that gives you access to brutal things and belligerent things and bloodbound things or whatever, and those three traits give you access to a couple of sections of what might be 100 generic units, or let's say fewer than that, let's say maybe 50 generic units. And essentially what I've done is I've taken every conceivable but sensible and sort of like fitting with the standard Tolkien mythology sort of collection of figures that you might put. And so you don't have total list building freedom, you have freedom to put one of these 50 units on the table, and then your choice in cursed artifact sort of then directs you to a section of that map. And then you wouldn't be able to create so much, you basically just wouldn't be able to min max, because you just have a set of like pre-generated characters. It's just that there were 50 pre-generated characters that you could assemble.
I mean, I have a response here, but we're going to sign off on this part of this Rule of Carnage, and what we'll do is, we'll probably keep recording this, and I'll pop it up as an after dark, or if it goes on long enough for it to be a third part of a conversation, I'll put it up as a third part of the conversation. But this has been long enough for this to be a part of a conversation, so we'll sign off on this, and then I'll respond to Mike, and we'll continue to record, and we'll see what we do with the response.
I'm enjoying the fact that this has ended up being sort of part 2 of the philosophy of list building design, which we tackled earlier.
That too, and I think we've had a conversation about, because I really want to do a full conversation about the nature of the developer designer co-designer relationship, because I think it's something important and worth talking about. So it makes me happy that we've touched on how that relationship works, and people have seen it literally working in it's sort of in process. But for now, to avoid this being an excessively long chunk of video for people to watch, we're going to sign off. Thank you for watching, if indeed you still are. Please, if you found value in this content, like and subscribe. Drop some comments in the comments section. What do you think about the positions discussed here? Which version of Hobgoblin would excite you or interest you? Are you
are you a filthy min-maxer?
Are you a filthy min-maxer?
Are you a compulsive breaker of list building systems?
And do you want to just not have to listen to the monkey on your
report to your local police station?
You know, yeah, let us know. For now, we're going to sign off on this part of this conversation with Rule of Carnage, although it's going to be ongoing, and somewhere at some point there'll be something posted that will be the end of this chat. But for now, and to avoid keeping you all any longer, it's going to be goodbye from this episode of Rule of Carnage. So,
bye.
Bye.